That's us recording.
Is that us recording?
Yep.
The Cameron with his new glasses on.
Well, no, with my old glasses on because my eyes are getting bad.
Right, folks, how you doing? So the day for our next guest on All Areas podcast is a good friend of mine who I met, God, when was it, Cameron? About 3 years ago?
3 and a bit years ago.
3 and a bit years ago when I worked in a place called Project 42. And Cameron came in for some personal training, and we've just kept in touch ever since. And Cameron's got an amazing story. He's overcame a lot of personal difficulties, and I don't want to say too much because I would rather just let the man tell you himself. So, Cameron, welcome to All Areas. How are you today?
Lovely to see you, Barry, as a friend, but also in your professional capacity as the interviewer today.
Well, I'm still trying to touch up on my interviewing skills, so just bear with me, all right?
You're better than Parky.
I'm off script here. I'm off script, so so like All Areas, Cameron. It's just we're looking just to speak to people. Initially just in Edinburgh, because that's where me and Daryl are from, but we hope to reach people out with that soon. So, God, going through people that I've found myself is an inspiration. Ever since I met you, you've always been kind of an inspiration to me, just because of the just the things that personal things that you've overcame, and I just think you're just an inspiration. Your story. So, if you could just tell people maybe about why you came to Project 42, but also and how we met, and then what you've been through in that and in your life that's kind of brought you to this point.
Okay, so do you want will I condense my life into a shorter story?
Yes. Okay
then. So I first met Barry, as he said, in I'm sure it's about 3.5 years ago. I was still actually working in my job in a university in Edinburgh, but it had been very difficult because there was a lot of pressure. I was working 14-hour days, and at that point I was diagnosed with cancer, so I was off work, struggling a bit emotionally. But not because of the cancer, it's because I was at the point of leaving my job because it was so stressful and I knew it wasn't for me, and I felt like I'd lost my identity. So I just strolled down the road in Leith, down Leith Walk one day, and got to the bottom, and I just spotted this Project 42. And I'm from Aberdeen, so everybody likes a freebie. So I went in for a look. And that's when I met the wonderful Barry. So yeah, Barry was my personal trainer.
Usually when people talk about being in Project 42, they tell me how they walk past the Curgate and they just heard my voice, but you actually never said that, so I'm glad you said that.
No, I came in and I met a couple of other people first, and then you were recommended. So I think I actually came in search of you because you'd been highly recommended. And from there on, we've just been in contact, and now we're friends and colleagues. But back then, although it was tough because I was diagnosed with a cancer, to be honest, my life had always been a bit turbulent and traumatic, and therefore I think even back then, 3.5 years ago, I felt prepared and resilient enough to kind of do battle with the illness. So I'll step back slightly from that moment. So, I mean, I was born in a small fishing village in the very north of Scotland. I was born in 1976. Back then, it was completely different. The village had only 700 people, so very small village. Everybody knew each other's business. I thought back then, not necessarily in 1976 when I was just born, but later on I thought I was the only gay in the village. And it's definitely something I wouldn't talk about because it was a quiet fishing village, which it wasn't the done thing to like men back then.
Was it Peterhead?
Pardon?
Was it Peterhead?
Portsoy.
Portsoy, right, okay, cool.
In the same area, though.
Is it? No, I knew I was at university where an access course for a guy from Peterhead, and
Yeah, I think it's 20 something miles away from Portsoy, but it's the same mentality where men are supposed to be men. Well, it was back then, and I should have either gone out as a fisherman or a farmer or something. So what a disappointment I was in my community. But yeah, so but back then, I mean, life was tough because although I had a mum and a dad, and I lived with two brothers, my dad wasn't a nice man. He was an alcoholic. He was abusive. So for the first 17 years of my life, I kind of lived. Well, me and my family were all abused by my dad virtually every day in some form, whether that was physically, mentally, psychologically. Um, and we were chucked out of our home. Even though it was a little village, we'd have to walk the streets, but we had to live this pretense and act and facade that everything was fine. I mean, me and my mum, we loved walking the streets, at midnight. I mean, that's what we just told all the neighbours. We like going out for strolls at unusual times and taking the bad weather and the rain, because we couldn't have anybody really think that it was my dad that was the issue, because we would get into trouble again. My dad was so abusive that if he'd heard that we'd been talking about him, or let the secret out the bag, then we would have just got a hiding again. So for 17 years, everybody thought my dad was an angel. Everybody thought we were the perfect model type family. And it was tough because I didn't like school. So I'd spend my time in a school I didn't like. I'd then go home and then spend the evenings with my dad, which was tough. And then I think, so I left school when I was 18, because one kind of thing I discovered as a child, I started playing the piano at the age of 6. And that was my savior, because throughout my dad's abuse, I could use the piano as a way to escape. So I would play the piano lots. Anytime there was an argument, if I could, I would go through to the room where the piano was and try to drown out my dad's voice. But actually, it became deeper than that. I just loved it so much that I ended up wanting to be a piano player, a concert pianist. So,
oh, really?
But thankfully, my dream came true, because when I was 17 and a half, finally my mum left my dad. I mean, I did kind of reconcile with my dad later on in life, but at that point, I always view it as that was the happiest day of my life, because my mum and dad got divorced. I was away from my dad. I was with my mum. Everything was much quieter, no abuse. First time in 17 years, I had tranquility in my life. I had silence. There was no abuse, no shouting, no violence, nothing. And it was bliss. So that day, which a lot of kids, I know a lot of friends whose parents have got divorced, and that was traumatic for them. I put out the balloons and had a party, because it is what I'd been waiting for ever since I was about 3 or 4. But then I went on to study music. My mum got her own council house. Didn't really see my dad that much, obviously, because at that point I didn't really connect with him, because I'd connected too much with him in the past. I didn't want to connect with him anymore. Although he has given me a very dry sense of humour, as your listeners can tell today. But yes, I went off, studied music, studied in Aberdeen, Edinburgh, London, studied in total for 8 years, did diplomas, did my degree, as a performer. So I finally qualified as a concert pianist, and I've played in various places in, I call it my past life, from like Poland to London, Manchester, Halifax, and Nova Scotia, even in America and Long Beach, in different and loved it. I never did performing full time, because, like most musicians, you still need a daily job as well. So I worked in a university, well, different universities in Edinburgh, and worked my way up. But actually, at the age of 32, you know me, I mean, I love to tell a really good, happy story. At the age of 32, for the first time, I was diagnosed with my first cancer, which was kidney cancer. So I was only 32, had been ill for a year. They couldn't discover what the problem was. But yeah, it turned out it was kidney cancer. But literally a month before I was diagnosed with kidney cancer, not my dad, but my father figure in my life, who was like a second cousin, he had just died of cancer. And my mum had just been diagnosed with breast cancer, all in the same 2 month period that I was diagnosed with a kidney cancer. And it was
Oh,
tough because I'd lost the only father figure I ever had through cancer. I was worrying that I'd lose my mum through cancer because she had just been diagnosed with breast cancer and she was my best friend. And then I got the kidney cancer. But actually, things just changed completely because I got the operation on the 8th of April 2008, and it sticks in my memory. It was a Thursday, I think. And I woke up from the operation to remove the tumor in the afternoon to discover I was paralyzed. So the
oh,
operation had went wrong, and I'd ended up initially paralyzed from the neck down, but actually my right side came back, but my left side didn't. So I stayed in the Western General Hospital in Edinburgh for nearly a month, because the wound and everything was really bad. And then I was transferred to Astley Ainsley Hospital in Morningside in Edinburgh
aye.
to be an inpatient. So I was literally in there living inside the hospital for months and months to learn how to do things again, to walk, to do the toilet, to clean myself, to shower, everything. I had to learn how to do everything again. And that was traumatic because back then I was only 32. And to go from one day of being completely capable to feeling the next day I woke up and I was completely incapable, and that continued for months. It was a challenge. And I remember phoning my mum because I couldn't see my mum because she was in the north of Scotland getting chemo.
Aye.
I was in Edinburgh in a hospital. I remember phoning her the day I was taken into Astley Ainsley, and I should say it's an excellent hospital, but I'd never been there. So I arrived in the hospital in a wheelchair. No one back then really asked permission, so I wasn't asked permission. So suddenly I was lifted off my wheelchair onto another wheelchair and then lifted onto a bed without anybody saying, "Do you mind if we touch you?" I felt as though I was completely controlled by other people. And there was people screaming in the ward because they never knew exactly what happened to me. They now know it was a stroke, but they didn't then. They didn't know where to put me, so they put me in the head injury unit, which had a lot of beautiful people, but a lot of them tended to scream a lot.
Aye.
So I remember phoning my mum and just saying, "Get me out of here! Literally, get me out of here!" Like they do in the jungle to out, to Anton Deck. Um, Sadly, there was no Anton Deck in that hospital, um, and I was institutionalized really because I couldn't control my own life. And after many months of being in there, when I finally did get home,
So how long were you in there for total, Cameron?
in total between the Western General Hospital and Astley Ainsley Hospital, I was 5 months in hospital.
Long time, eh?
Yeah.
Long
So,
time.
but by the time I went home, I was scared.
Aye, I know.
So I was originally scared to go into the hospital, but I then became scared to leave the hospital.
Hmm.
Um, but my dry humor, everything kept me going. But actually, even though I'd just been through that, even though I was still in the wheelchair, etc., and my left side was still paralyzed, I still went back to work. I still went back to my university job because I think, in hindsight, I think at the time I thought I was being exceptionally strong.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think in hindsight, what I was being was I was just trying to pretend everything was okay.
Aye.
Um, but the worst thing for me wasn't the cancer or the paralysis, but I had to give up playing the piano because my left hand wouldn't work. And that for me was the worst part because I
Aye.
had, although I've chatted a lot so far,
Yeah,
back
that's what you're here for.
back then I didn't chat though. Back then as a youngster and even up to my kind of 30s, I would chat at work, but I wasn't renowned for my motivational talking. I was relatively silent. I was an introvert because I did all my talking through the piano.
Aye.
And suddenly I lost that ability. So I had to relearn actually how to engage with people without this wooden instrument. And that was difficult. But since then, I've had obviously run-ins with ill health a few times, and currently I'm still battling with pancreatic cancer, which I was properly diagnosed with 2 years ago. And I had chemotherapy last year, which wasn't successful. So I'm currently going through immunotherapy at the moment to see if that can fight the cancer. Um, and throughout all of this, my strength was always my mum. But sadly, 2 years ago, my mum was diagnosed incorrectly. She was told she had a hernia. But then actually 2 years ago, we found out that it wasn't a hernia, it was womb cancer, which had spread to the bowel and the brain and various places. And she only had 3 weeks. By the time she was diagnosed, we only had her for about 3-4 weeks. So yeah, in the last few years, I feel like I've lived a lifetime. But I wouldn't change it. I've loved it because, and it sounds crazy, but I know myself more than I've ever known myself. I still get low days, but I accept the vulnerability that I've had, and I see it as a gift. And even with my mum's death, who was my angel, my best friend, she was more than a mum, she was like a sister. And going through the abuse and even the cancer, she would protect me and I would protect her. Um, it has been traumatic losing her, but at the same time, what really helped was during that last few weeks of our life, because I knew her so well and she knew me so well, we didn't really have to chat. We just held each other's hand, and the communication was powerfully deep. It wasn't then about talking about things we had left unsaid because we'd said everything. It was more about just talking, but listening to each other's breath and voice, and holding her hand and seeing the wrinkles on her hand, which I can still picture in my head. And it was such a deep connection that for that 3 weeks, seeing her every single second of the day, I should say that was because we couldn't get a Marie Curie nurse, we couldn't get a Macmillan nurse. So I then put hold my treatment and I went up north to become my mum's nurse in effect. And actually being a gay man was perfect because I could nurse my man, nurse my mum, and I had to bathe her and wash her and look after her. But she didn't mind at all because I was gay. It didn't bother me about the female body. I didn't cry either. So seeing a woman didn't make me traumatized, which it could have. So yeah, it's been a journey the last few years it's been a journey for 44 years of really coming to friends with resilience, but also vulnerability. Um, and I just see everything as a gift, from the cancer to my mum's death and everything. It's actually opened up my life and made me appreciate who I am and the world around me even more.
How, thanks so much for sharing that, Cameron. It's like, it's very humbling to God, listen to what you've been through and stuff. And we've had a few guests on this show, and there was a guy, David Atali, a few weeks back who interviewed, and he'd lost the bottom half of his leg, and other people we've interviewed who have been through challenges and stuff. And it just sometimes I think to myself, you worry sometimes about stuff that in essence doesn't really matter, do you know? And you hear other people's stories about the challenges that they've overcame, and man, yours is it just seems to have been a constant maybe getting over one thing and something else has came along, and then so it's so how you obviously have got this resilience. And so how would you define that then, resilient, if anybody else is going through a tough time in their life just now, what do you think is when the world almost feels like it's too much?
Yeah.
And it's you've almost at times got your head in your hands and you're I can't cope with it anymore. Please don't give me anything else, because you feel that you at times you're at rock bottom. What would you say to somebody in that position who feels that they've got a lot of pressure on them, or a lot of, because now you say that you've been through that, it's you're grateful for it, so
I wouldn't change it.
How do you get to that? Is that just a matter of time? Is it a matter of acceptance? What is it exactly?
I think it's I think it's different things for different people, but there's definitely a combination that gets you there. Because yeah, I had my very 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 low moments, and it's changed throughout my life. But really, what? So firstly, people define resilience as being able to deal with, in effect, one challenge after the next and to rise above it. Um, Resilience to me, I always look, I'm very visual, and you're a personal trainer, so you will understand this. I always think resilience is like when you go to the gym and you want to develop a muscle, you go to the gym, you do the exercises, but then you don't exercise for a few days, and you might get some pain because your muscle is hurting because you've been exercising it. But then after that healing period, the muscle is stronger. And then by going backwards and forwards to the gym all the time on a regular basis, that muscle just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, instead of going to the gym, with resilience, what you're doing is you're taking your heart and your soul through, instead of the gym, you're taking it through traumas. But with each trauma, that resilience muscle gets stronger, and then it heals. And then another challenge happens, and then it gets stronger. So actually, I think, firstly, like everybody that's listening, everybody has the capacity to survive everything they're given. I'm not saying that's the case if you also suffer with some kind of mental health issue. That's completely different. Um, but everybody has the ability to befriend resilience, because as long as you've got the inner strength to face something and to learn from it, it is completely possible. But it's not just resilience that enables you to deal with something or get through it. There's a combination. So for me, yes, I was very resilient, and because I was through so much trauma, and it was just like you said, one trauma after the next, then my resilience muscle was strong. But I had a really beautiful brother and mother who I connected with. So my support, even though it was difficult because my dad was an abuser as a kid, but my support was still very good. I had a mum who loved me and a brother who loved me, and we created this inner triangle within our bigger family to survive. So there was that support, but equally there was the love of music. Because even though when I had to stop playing the piano, I still passionately loved music. So there was a connection to something else, um, to keep my mind focused. So I wasn't just thinking about the traumas all the time. There was also hope because I'd been through, and this is where I see my dad. My dad's abuse was a gift, kinda, because with abuse, people, you can have short-term trauma or longer term trauma. Some people might be caught in a bomb blast or a car crash or something like that, and that's a momentary trauma, which is tragic and can cause so much damage. But because I was getting trauma every single day for 17 years over such a prolonged period of time, I was used to having hope, if that makes sense, because I had to find a way to survive. So as a child, I would have to take the abuse from my dad because I couldn't control him. He controlled me. But inside, I had this hope, tenacious hope, that things would get better. And even though it took 17 years, I'm not sure how many days that equates to, but 17 years is a long time to waking up with abuse every day, but to still see hope. But that hope, that courage that I had that one day things would change, plus the strength inside for me to go, that's enough for me to live. Because there was a few times as a kid or when I had cancer, I did say to myself, I want to die. Because I have also dealt with depression and things like that as well. But I didn't ever think now's the time to do it. Firstly, because I didn't want to hurt my mum and my brother, but also I was living for that hope. Tomorrow might come. That a bit like if anybody watches Only Fools and Horses, Del Boy always says, this time next year, I'll be a millionaire. And I kept on saying for 40 years, I've always said to myself, this time next year, things will be different. And up until now, It never has. It's actually gotten worse in some ways, but the hope's always there. And it's only been in the last 2 years that I would say that I've realized that, yeah, I've survived due to having the support, resilience, hope, belief that it would get better, but also of having things to divert my attention, being grateful for what I've got, being living more in the present, because I used to spend a lot of my life living in the future, or
Mm.
or worse, living in the past.
I
So
think
I,
I think a lot of people do that. Like a lot of people do that.
I would look at the past a lot and think, wow, this is what I've been through really bad, and I would build it up in my head and relive it. But suddenly I realized in the last few years that by staying in the past, I can't have a future. If I spend my whole life thinking about the past like I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not living. I'm just being trapped in a moment that was horrendous. But then I also realized because I've got cancer, I might not be here in so many years' time. So I had to stop living in the future as well. And that was such a beautiful realization because by stop living in the past and by stop living in the future, there was only one place to live, and that was in the present.
Aye.
Um, and that's what I do now. And I love it because even when there's silence, I'm listening to the noises, or outside watching the birds in nature, and I'm having a cup of coffee and I'm thinking about the taste of the coffee. And I've taken it to what people would call mindfulness levels. I now absorb the moment, like chatting to you. I can see the beautiful wallpaper you've got behind you and stuff. I observe everything that's happening around me because I just want to absorb life as it is now. Because I'm a true believer that tomorrow isn't promised to everyone.
I know what, like, honestly, it's so, like, when you say that, like, it, it's so true, but it's so, at times we can get so caught up in our problems of like what's happened in the past and what we're going to, and I think even in what we're going to do in the future. But, and I think this time just now as well, in the midst of this, like, coronavirus as well, it's like there is nothing we can do. Like, so it's almost like because we don't know what the future is going to hold. It's like we can't go too far into that. This has happened, so there's no point in looking back. So you've almost like planted in the moment. Actually, what really interests me, Cameron, you said something earlier, and I was actually going to ask your opinion on it. Was like, so you said that you kind of became uh, institutionalized in the hospital, and you were living like you didn't really know how to live because people were taking care of you, and it was under certain conditions. And I watched an interesting thing. Like, I really enjoy listening, like Russell Brand. I think he's like some of the things he says are really that I think I really agree with. And he put one the other day about like, if and when and as we come out of lockdown, are we going to be like kind of scared to go back to that? Like, like, could you relate to that at all? Having like been in hospital and then coming out,
I,
like, can you see any similarities or?
I can, but I'm going to be honest. I've thoroughly enjoyed lockdown. So I can relate to it because I would imagine that a lot of people in lockdown probably feel like I did at the age of 32 when I was in Ashley Ainsley Hospital, in a rehab hospital, because in that hospital, I was, for many months before I was allowed to go out, I was in the same ward every day. I saw the same people every day, the same
Mm,
noises every day, the same food every day, the same routine every day. Couldn't go outside. Other people were controlling my life. And because of the pain, they were even controlling how I breathed or how I slept or how I moved. I mean, it was it wasn't brutal, but that's a word I would have described it as back then. But it wasn't. It was loving. It just felt like a prison. And
right.
a lot of people might find the current isolation has been like that, that they've been in the same room every day or the same house every day. They've maybe been on their own. They've maybe not had contact with people, or maybe they've been cooped up in their house with a couple of people that is lovely and beautiful, but has been driving them crazy, and they've not been able to escape. You never know. And every day is the same routine. You know, they can't get up and go to work anymore, so they get up and they're in their flat, and they have dinner in their flat, and they have watch TV in their flat, and they go to bed in their flat or house. And that's difficult, because suddenly people go from their routine to a new routine, or to not having a routine. And I think a lot of people will have struggled in the lockdown with that, because humans need a routine, because routine is what gives us a feeling of safety or comfort or
Right.
normality. And everybody's normality is different, but it is everybody's normality that has been affected.
Mm-hmm.
So I completely understand the fear that some people will have now of leaving their flat, of leaving isolation, and integrating themselves back into society. But also, that's going to take a long time over the next few months. I mean, that will be done slowly. And
Aye.
that the fact that it will be done slowly will help people to adjust, because it'll be at a
Aye.
slower pace. But people will still be worried. And I can relate to that a bit, because I'm in isolation due to the immunotherapy. But I get really nervous going outside. From the point of view is, I'm very aware that if I catch a bug, so not even COVID, but any bug, that it could completely attack my immune system, which hasn't got a lot of strength at the moment, and could
Aye.
completely make me a lot worse. So yeah, I can relate to how people are feeling. What I would say to them is, take your time, go out and integrate yourself, but still with the support of your loved ones. Use the skills and the things that I've spoken about already, which is, connect to your support, listen to your body, listen to the things around you, live more than the presence.
Mm.
Don't even worry about next week. So you're going out today for a walk. Well, don't worry about how will it feel in 2 weeks when I go out for a walk. Just focus on the moment, because you can build up so much trauma in your head about what's going to happen, and it'll never happen.
Oh, it's the human mind. The human mind is just like,
Well, what you don't know, you make up.
I know, and it's, how much do you think that comes in with being Cameron, that, like, almost, how can I say this? You know, when things are going well in your life, you didn't overly think, like, about it. You go with the flow more. Whereas when things aren't going as you expect, then you kind of question, why has this happened? Why has that happened? But and I think sometimes that's when you think more. But I wanted to ask you on, like, because you've been through so much, right? Did it ever help you to, like, so I think what I've personally became more aware of over the past 5 or 6 years is that whenever something like negative happens to you, and you may be hurt or, like, whatever, like, sometimes I help it thinks to look at it from, like, a larger macro spiritual kind of aspect, in that, like, regardless of what you're going through, you're going to get something from it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think so. This will be a difficult one for kind of listeners or viewers, because to answer your question, there are different people. Yes, the one you describe, which is, there's a lot of people in life who, when the moment is good, just focus on that good. And they don't think about life as such. They just get on with their life automatically. Um, and that would be a beautiful place to be if you're that person. Albeit, though, there is an issue that sometimes when you do then get a knock, it's a shock to you, and you're kind of blown off your feet. You're not sure how to cope with it. But it's important to remember that's only one type of person. I know a hell of a lot of people, and I used to be this kind of person. I lived my life in nerves and worry. You get people who are born worriers. So strangely, I think the reason why I coped so well in my life is because I was a worrier. Because if you worry about things, I'm not saying I was pessimistic, but I was a stroke of my glass, although it was always, half full. Um, I was always a realist because I'd been through what I'd been through. But
Right.
a lot of people are worriers, and therefore, when something bad happens, it doesn't shock them so much. But actually, the bad side of it is for them is that it kind of validates the fact that they were right to worry. And both sets of extremes is not right. Um, so no, I think I would have liked a life where I didn't have so much worry, and I would have liked a life when I was younger, where I didn't worry about things and I loved what was happening and appreciating the life that I had. But I think for me, I had to go through everything I've been through to now become what you're talking about, which is I am now very relaxed. And as for instance, I've thoroughly enjoyed COVID-19. Yes, I've been in my flat all the time, but I'm like, way hey, because when has anybody had 3 or 4 months to do things in their flat or to learn new hobbies or to get time to read? Or plus, I mean, like you, I'm a coach, and I was still able to do some of my coaching during COVID.
Mhm.
So I've seen COVID as I mean, I love learning and I love connecting with myself and other people. So I've seen COVID as this marvelous opportunity of doing that and celebrating other people and loving to get to know myself better. So yeah, that I mean that indicates kind of where I'm at because I've stopped worrying so much about things. I'm now that person that you kind of talk about, which is I don't worry about the future so much. I love the present, but unlike what I used to be, when a trauma does happen, I probably laugh because I'm used to it, and I do truly know I can survive anything. And this is where it sounds crazy, but this is the gift my mum gave me. Now I'm not religious. I would say I'm more spiritual, but I have no defined beliefs at all in the slightest. But my mum faced death in that last few weeks, not with bitterness or anger or frustration or regret. She lived it with a can of Coca-Cola in her hand every second of the day, enjoying the taste of it and having a laugh. And she
Amazing.
was laughing until the day before she died. But that's actually stopped me from worrying, and that's why I think I always say to people, Mum's left me with this beautiful gift that if she can cope with death the way she did, um, so can I. But that has suddenly released all my fear of death, because ultimately that's what people are scared of. When people are faced with trauma or abuse or illness, the thing they're really scared of is either not having control of their own life or dying.
Mhm.
Well, I'm not scared of dying anymore. I'm scared of not living.
That's
And suddenly I see every day now, whether it's a traumatic day or a happy day, whatever type of day it is, it's a day and I'm still alive and I've still got another day, another opportunity to live a life today.
right. And it is so important that it is so important, and like I can struggle with that as well sometimes. Sometimes you can get bogged down in life and that, but like you just reminded me of oh God, what was it? Where you were talking about hope earlier, and there's the last bit on that movie, The Shawshank Redemption, where
I
he's
love that film.
talking about hope, and he's like, hope can be the best thing, and it's like living in the present. But if you are going through a difficult situation, there is always hope for it to get
Oh.
a bit better as well.
Some people have said to me, because a lot of people look at me and probably think I'm slightly away with the fairies or crazy or something. Because some people have genuinely said to me, but what's the point of hope? Because the thing you're hoping for might not happen.
Mhm,
And actually, sometimes the thing we're hoping for doesn't happen.
mhm.
But actually, for me, this is where this is what I love about hope, is that hope for me is about hoping that things will change in the future. But the fact that it might not strengthens my hope, if that makes sense.
Aye,
It makes me
aye,
even more determined to be hopeful
aye.
because actually sometimes what I will say, and this is the way I think, the best way to sum it up for me is nature. In nature, we get storms. We always see the storm coming. You know, we get so many weather reports we're told every day when a storm's coming. We even give them names like George and Bessie and Harold. But we know a storm's coming. And then the storm comes and it's really tough and it's wind and rain, or sometimes depending on where you live, it could be earthquakes or tsunamis but we know in nature that a storm always passes. And a storm somewhere in the world always leaves a rainbow. And that's how I see every challenge in life, is that yes, I can see the trauma coming, I can see the depression coming, I can see the event coming, and it feels bad. But it too shall pass. At some point, I fully believe with everything in life, and even with death itself, eventually things will clear up and there will be a rainbow left. Things always change.
Mm.
And that sounds maybe silly to some people, because if the last thing that happens is my death, then how am I going to see the rainbow? But that's where I've started to look deeper than death, because the fact is life continues,
Mm.
regardless of your religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs. Once I die, there will still be a rainbow somewhere in the world.
So what do you think like what would you say your philosophy is to life, Cameron, now? Like if you could from this age, what age you, Cameron? 44?
44.
44. Just say you could write a letter back to your, say, 15-year-old self, right? What advice would you give to that younger person?
It's a strange question, because having gone through the abuse, what I would say is I was never allowed to be young. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people who suffer child abuse will know exactly what I mean, because to suffer a long period of child abuse, you have to in effect lock away your inner child, and you
Aye.
have to become an adult overnight. So in effect, I mean, I was like little Einstein at the age of 4, because I had to be this mature head on my shoulders to survive. But I do know what you mean with the question. So I think I would say to my younger self, things will be tough, but actually that's the point of life.
Mm.
Life, as Forrest Gump would say, isn't a box of chocolates.
I thought you were going to do his accent now.
No, I was tempted, but I didn't. Um, Life, from the minute we're born, we know two things. Two things for definite. That life will be a roller coaster. It will be up and down. Nobody's
Mm.
life is plain sailing, because it wouldn't be a life. And
I know.
secondly, we're no, and now this is where people think I'm strange, but from the minute you're born, you're terminal.
I know. I know.
Now, sadly, some people are born and they don't have a life because they can be born stillborn. Some people are born, but then their terminal life finishes when they're a kid. Some people, though, like Vera Lynn, their terminal life doesn't finish till they're 103.
Aye.
Um, but I would say to my younger self, life is a challenge. You know that now, but you do have the strength to get through it. Love your family, connect to the people that you're closest to, like your mum, your brother. Be proud of yourself. Because back then I wasn't proud of myself. So I would say to my younger self, be proud of yourself, celebrate yourself. Um, but it's not going to be easy. But actually, you'll still will be laughing at the age of 44.
Mm.
You still will be having a very dry innuendo sense of humor. And take every opportunity you can and don't shy away from it.
Right.
The cliche saying, feel the fear and do it anyway. It is true. Regardless of your fears, just do it anyway, because your thought of the event is always far worse than the
Oh,
reality of the event.
like this is something that like the only way that you can get past your fears is to do them. Is to actually do them. Like the only way to get past your fears is to do them, and then you're like, well, what was I worried about? Or if your fear does end up being like hard, then you're like, well, I've survived, I've done it, and fears,
But what I would say to you is, so that would be my response to the young Cameron
mm-hmm,
from the aspect of trauma and challenges.
mm-hmm,
What I'd say to the young Cameron from the point of homosexuality and being gay is, don't be scared of who you are. Don't hide in the closet. Don't hide in yourself thinking that no one will love you if you suddenly reveal you're gay or if you are different.
right,
Be proud of being different. Celebrate being different. Because for many years I hid who I was.
mm-hmm,
I mean, I didn't come out from being, well, to announce I was gay till I was about 21. Told my family, well, my mum. Um, but actually, for me, it was a difficult time as well, because that was 21 years whilst I was going through abuse that I was suppressing who I really was.
right,
Um, so I'd say to the younger self, just be who you are, be who you want to be. If you want to jump about in a tutu in the middle of Port Soy and sprinkle fairy dust on all the fishermen, you do it.
I
Because
think amazing, and I think that whole comes down to like in this world sometimes, like as you grow up, it's quite hard to be authentic, yeah. Like it's quite hard, and it's only sometimes I think as you get older you realise, well, there's no point in being like any other way. Like you've just got to be yourself,
and you know me, I mean, there's different levels of vulnerability stroke authentic.
right,
You get some people who are authentic and they do touch upon their vulnerability. But I think you know me well enough. I don't care talking about my traumas and my cancer, or I don't care about talking about being gay, because we've only got one life to live. So I am going to wear my life fully out there, not to make people feel weird, but because I want to feel alive. And there's a
right,
difference. I don't live my life openly because I am trying to show up in other people's life. I live my life openly because I want to show up in my life.
right. That's the way like that's the way you've just got to be, yeah. You've just got to be. How much do you think, Cameron, that be like? This is something that I think about quite a lot. Like, so what you're saying, like, how much do you think external things is like material things, like nice car, a fancy house, a lot of money? Like, do you think that can really give you like that internal happiness? Like what do you think?
I think for some people it can,
Mm-hmm.
but that's because that's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's difficult to answer your question. Because if you're a person that you like to have things, and if you're a person if your definition of success is the amount of money in your bank and the car you've got and the flat you've got and the type of partner you have, and then if you get that, then your life will be amazing to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I personally think that regardless of that belief, when we're all older, hopefully older, when we're all older and on your deathbed and you're looking back at life,
Mm-hmm.
are you really going to think about the sports car you had that cost £100,000, or the fact that you had this amazing job? I think I've read a few stories and books about people dying and stuff, and mostly when people reach the end of their life, what they're really thinking about is the people they met.
Aye, totally.
the
Aye.
experiences they had. And people get upset because they don't, at the point of death, you don't get upset because you're going to leave your Jaguar and outside on the gravel. You get upset because you can't see your beautiful people, your loved ones anymore. So, yes, I do think, particularly earlier on in life, a lot of people do look at the materialistic things and the cars and the money.
Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Aye, at all.
And I completely, because I think people should be happy. And if that's what to make people happy, it makes them happy, and that's good. But what I would say is, as you get older and as you get to that point in your life when, you know, you've got less life left than you've lived,
Aye.
things change, because it's not about money and possessions. You start to look at the quality of the friendships, the quality of the life you've got, the quality of the laughs, the quality of your family. It's all about not materialistic things, but things that would link to your internal happiness.
Aye, totally.
But you're right, there is nothing wrong with wanting that beautiful house or sports car, and there's nothing wrong with achieving it and celebrating it. But for me, I'm not that kind of person. I value people
Mhm.
and moments more than I value a possession.
I think sometimes moments, when you have them in the moment, you don't realise it, but it's only like after you realise, oh man, that was amazing. That, you know what I mean? And it's that, I it's like, I think this whole period of like isolation and coronavirus and that, it has, like, well, it's made a lot of people just, I would think differently about their life and what's important and what their goals are and stuff like that. So it's a funny one, eh? And it's
Life's,
like,
I mean, life's funny anyway, because, I mean, I mean, people say this statement, but you don't know what you've got. You don't truly know what you've got until you've lost it.
I know,
And
I know.
I can't remember who the person who said this was, but it was a quote by a writer that I recently read, which was, you don't know truly that you've loved until you lose that love.
Aye,
And I know that, and that's part of the gift that I see that the cancer in life has given me, and I see it as a gift, is that I haven't realized all of this at the age of 90 or after I've died. I've been given the gifts in life to realize the beauty in life, to realize the things I love before I lose them when I'm still in my 40s. And that's the gift for me. You know, I've discovered what life means for me at an age that I can still have fun with it.
aye. So you think, Cameron, do you think that then it's you that gives your life its own purpose? Like, do you, like, instead of taking it from somewhere else, it's you that defines what your purpose in life is? If you believe in
I
if you believe in a purpose, if
I
that's such a thing.
I think people and things can shape your purpose, because everything can impact on each other. But I think it's only you that can define your purpose, and there's a difference. So other people can shape your purpose and give you purpose, but actually you are the only one that can define your purpose, because
Aye,
you're the only one that can decide what that true purpose is.
aye, definitely. Do you think, going by what you've said, and I'm a big believer in this, it almost like it's do you think you would have got to your mindset in the way you are just now if you hadn't have had the challenges that you've had?
No, and it makes perfect sense to me when I say this. Hopefully, it will to your listeners as well. But why would I have? Why would I have come to this conclusion? If I had had such a rosy, beautiful life, yeah, I would have been happy. Don't get me wrong, and that would make me happy. I mean, I'd be happy that my life was happy. But 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 sometimes the greatest form of learning, which is what you're really talking about, the
Aye,
greatest form of life learning only comes out of trauma and
aye,
tragedy. Because if my life had been very happy and my parents were both still alive and I had never been abused or never had cancer, I wouldn't know the limitations of life.
Mm.
But by
Mm, totally.
truly experiencing that limitations of life, the fragility of life, the hurt in life, that's made me fully realize and appreciate where I'm at and what I've got.
And that's an amazing thing, eh? That's an amazing thing. So, what if you have got any like desires or for what the next year? Or I know you say you live day by day, and what is there anything that you would like to achieve in the short term or the longer term? Or
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a like you, I'm a coach, and
Mhm.
and you know this. We will often talk to clients about what where you're going to be in a year's time. What's your goals, and when do you want to achieve that goal by? So I can answer your question, but where I'm going with this is, but I no longer I don't attach a time scale to my plans anymore, because some days I could be in a lot of pain. I get severe pain at the moment, and sometimes I can be in pain for 3 days. But also with the cancer, I've still got hope, but there's just no definites of where I'll be in a year or
Aye.
2 years' time. So yeah, I do have a lot of dreams and hopes. They're not necessarily to be achieved in the next year. I just want to achieve them, and maybe some of the listeners can help me for some of them. So I have a whole list of dreams I still want to achieve. So if anybody can get me on the Oprah Winfrey show, please help me. If anybody could at least maybe, I mean, I've got an amazing partner, but if any of you could get me just to have a meal with Chris Pratt, I'd love to have a meal with Chris Pratt. Um, I would like to do a parachute jump. I've always wanted to do that.
Amazing.
I would like to write a book, because actually my mum used to write a lot of poetry, and when she died, we found this beautiful folder with all her poems that she wrote. So, firstly, I've always wanted to write a book about my mum's life because she never got to do it, but plus she was too humble. But I'd love to write a book about my mum's life and her poetry so that in some way, when we're all not here, my mum still exists in some way
Aye.
for other people. I
Aye.
would like to write a book actually about myself and my journey, so I want to do that. I'd love to have far more coaching clients. So if anybody's listening and you want some coaching, um, but in all seriousness, yes, I do. There's lots of things I want. But for the first time in my life, and I genuinely mean this, I'm content with what I've got.
And
And that's not me saying I haven't given up my dreams. If any of you can get me that lunch, my dinner with Chris Pratt, please help me because I'm desperate to meet the man. But I'm content because I have a partner who is beautiful. I've got a brother. I've got a few brothers, but I've got one in particular that I'm very close to. I am doing coaching. I make jewelry. I'm still alive. I still waking up in the morning. And actually, I feel content. And for me, I mean, that's probably I see as a gift as well because I no longer feel like I have to strive to be successful. And I
Mhm.
think maybe that's it, is that I no longer try to be successful.
And it almost
I,
sounds by
I try to be
almost
happy, and there's a difference.
aye, and well, it sounds like by giving up that striving to be successful, you have become successful in your own right, if you know what I mean.
And what you're saying is what I truly believe now, because as a coach, you're the same. You help people because they want to be successful. But something I genuinely only realized very recently is it would be quite easy to spend your whole life searching for success, but never achieving it.
Aye,
But
I agree.
because happiness is so linked to success, so I'm a great believer that you can't achieve success without happiness, but you can achieve happiness without success.
Mhm.
And because I'm now happy, success in that sense doesn't matter for me.
Aye, aye. And I think it's a really important point, that like it's always an inside job, like always an inside job. If you feel in here, if you feel at peace and content, then that's the best place to start. And then if you can get that, then I would imagine that's when that outside stuff then begins to kind of happen.
Yeah. And but don't get me wrong, I still get my tough days, I still get my low moments like everybody does. So I'm not sitting here as some kind of angel. But because most of my life is now spent in contentment, that makes it even easier to deal with the challenges.
Well, Cameron, for what it's worth, I think like for everything that you've shared and everything that you've been through, like you're just like, you're an inspiration to me since I met you. Like, so it's like you're just like the things you've been through, it's like you've got so much wisdom, and like I always really value our conversations and the insights that you have that you pass on to me. Like, so I just want to like thank you for sharing your story today. It's been a pleasure like speaking to you. It's been like we speak pretty much every second day anyway, but it's been especially it's been nice in this kind of format and context today to kind of like go in that depth. So I hope everybody that listens to this can maybe get a bit of insight or wisdom from it. If anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask me or Cameron, please feel free to drop me or Cameron a message, or Daryl. And Cameron, would you like to sign off with just like some wisdom for our viewers?
Just, I mean, firstly, thank you for interviewing me and having me here today, because my hope is I don't share my life story just to chat about it. The reason I really share my life story is because I want other people to maybe connect it in some way. Because
like
actually, say again?
Like Chris Pratt.
100%. Sadly, and I will cheer it up slightly in a minute, but I'm 44. I grew up in the late 70s. I mean, that's 44 years ago. But we still have child abuse. We still have cancer. We still have strokes. We still have everything that makes us vulnerable. And yes, we have grown so much in society and in technology, but there is still people abusing other people, and that hasn't changed. So the reason I also talk is because I hope that somebody who is going through that abuse or that cancer or that challenge will find some kind of hope or energy within my story to believe that things can get better. For me, what I would say to your listeners is have a dry sense of humor. Get me that date for Chris Pratt, please. If you want to help me, just get me that date with Chris Pratt.
You never know, Cameron. You never know what can happen online nowadays. So,
but don't stop having your dreams. But love each day. Look at each day. Enjoy the food you're eating. Enjoy what you're seeing. Hold your partner's hand. Enjoy the hugs. Enjoy the moments. Live in the presence and be grateful for what you've got. Because actually, yes, you'll still get your dreams and your goals, but by truly loving each day that you have just now, your life will be even more richer.
What else can I say?
My Chris Pratt.
Miss Cameron Murdoch. Absolute
Thank you
pleasure.
so much. I've loved chatting
pleasure.
to you.
Right. Take care.
Take care. Bye for now.
Take it easy. See you, Cameron.